Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Nurdle Patrol Health of the Great Lakes. My name is Amy Kabrhel, and I'm an associate professor of chemistry at UW Green Bay. I primarily teach at the Manitowoc and Shipwreck campuses, and I have coordinated with the Manitowoc Public Library this year to perform a citizen science project. And so what we're doing is we are collaborating on monthly events to engage the community in some citizen science. So what that means is just everyday citizens helping out with the science activities that are happening around the world. We have specifically chosen Nurdle Patrol as our citizen science project for the year. And so what that means is that we are helping collect data on nurdles and giving that data to the scientists who study them. So you might be asking yourself, what is a nurdle? And that's what I asked myself the first time I heard the word too. But nurdles are tiny plastic pellets that are used as the core material to make the other plastics that we use in our everyday lives. Nurdles are very, very small. They're about this big. I don't have an example in front of me tonight. And they range in color from white to light gray, sometimes green. They come in different shapes and sizes. Oh, there's a wonderful picture of one of the nurdles. And so these are the raw plastic material that companies can use to make things like plastic bags, plastic spoons, plastic forks, all sorts of different plastic materials. And so when nurdles get transported around the world, they sometimes fall out of their shipping containers, and then they end up washing up on our beaches, and that can be a cause of pollution. So we are doing a citizen science project this year where we are monthly going out on our local beaches and collecting as many nurdles as we can find. And then at the same time, we're just cleaning the beaches in collaboration with the Alliance for the Great Lakes. And it's a really fun activity. And we hope that you will join us in these monthly initiatives to help us clean our beaches, learn more about pollutants, and feel good about our environment. So what we're doing for our activity today is we're going to have a panel of 4 experts helping us learn more about pollution in the Great Lakes. And they are a wonderful collection of people that have a lot of knowledge about plastics pollution and other types of pollution in our Great Lakes. And so I'm just going to give you a little bit more information, and then we'll go around and have everybody introduce themselves, and they'll be able to describe their expertise and give a little bit more information. And then what we really want is to turn this into a conversation with everybody who's watching live tonight. So please submit any and all of your questions. And we have the wonderful gentleman, Tim, in the background. He works for the Manitowoc Public Library. He is going to collect all those questions and feed them out to us. And if you hear this disembodied voice, that's Tim. He's helping us out in that background, collecting all those questions. So please give us all the questions that you have, and we'd be happy to answer them all. So like I said, this is a panel of 4 wonderful experts that come from different areas, and I'm going to have them each introduce themselves in sequence. They have slides prepared, but we're going to keep the slides to kind of a minimum because we really want to get to all those questions that you all might have about the health of our Great Lakes related to pollution, specifically plastics pollution and things like that. So to begin with, we're going to go with Titus, who is my colleague, and actually his office is right next to mine.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, so I am Titus Seilheimer. I am the fisheries specialist with Wisconsin Sea Grant. And so really my job is to work on Great Lakes issues. I'm here in Manitowoc. So although our program is based in Madison, we do have these presence on the coast. So I'm here, right. I could almost see the Lake Michigan if I had some windows, and Amy could too if her windows weren't looking at a parking lot. So, yeah, looking forward to talking nurdles and plastic and the Great Lakes.
And next up is Sarah.
Hello, my name is Sarah Murphy. I'm ambassador with the Alliance for the Great Lakes. I've been working with the Alliance for 2 years, but in my Wayback Machine, I worked for the Shed Aquarium and actually did beach cleanups about 25 years ago with the Alliance. So I've been with them sort of on and off for a long time. The Alliance for the Great Lakes is a nonpartisan, nonprofit working across the Great Lakes and the region to protect the Great Lakes and make sure that they're fresh and clean for the people and all the creatures that depend on it for years to come. The Alliance for Great Lakes is headquartered in Chicago, with additional offices in Michigan, New York, Ohio, Wisconsin, and Washington, D.C. And our work is made possible by generous supporters throughout the Great Lakes region. The Alliance for Great Lakes basically has 3 basic areas they work in: policy, education, and local efforts. And the programs touch all 5 Great Lakes and all 8 Great Lakes states. And my role has been particularly in doing the adopted beach cleanups. So that's what I'll be focusing on today, really talking about the cleanups, what we find, and how that informs decision making and how important that is for citizen science.
Thank you, Sarah. Next up is Gavin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gavin Dehnert. I am an emerging contaminant scientist, again with Wisconsin Sea Grant. Work closely with Titus. Unlike Titus, where he gets to work with all the fisheries, I focus mainly on looking at how these different contaminants are impacting our aquatic ecosystems. So I kind of bounce between looking at 3 big ones, whether that be pesticides, PFAS, or the one we're going to be talking about today being microplastics or marine debris. And a lot of what I like to do is kind of look at how those contaminants are impacting both our plants and animals that are in the systems, and kind of how we can better protect them moving forward.
Great, thank you. And last up is Russ.
Hi, good evening. I'm Russ Green. I'm the superintendent of the Wisconsin Shipwreck Coast National Marine Sanctuary, and definitely a little bit of an oddball here. So we are a marine protected area, a very special place off of the coast of Wisconsin, running about from Port Washington up to 2 rivers. And the main feature in this area are historic shipwrecks that tell our nation's story. They're incredibly well preserved by cold, fresh water. But the really kind of cool thing about this, that's a great presentation. I'm happy to come back and do that another time. We're one of 15 national marine sanctuaries across the nation, much like national parks, but we're underwater. And education and stewardship are a huge part of our mission. So although this sanctuary focuses a lot of its time on heritage, citizen science and Great Lakes literacy, and that broader Lake Michigan conservation effort and education is a big part of our mission. So I'll share some slides in a bit that kind of make that connection. But I'm really interested in learning a lot more about plastics. The sanctuary is about 1.5 years old, so we have a lot of work to do as we spin up our education programs. And being aware of projects like this, it's really great because we can help facilitate some of these connections. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, everybody. And so those are our panelists for tonight. And so, like I said, we're going to let them each talk about their specialty for a little while, and then we'll open it up to questions. So Titus is actually going to represent 2 different areas of specialty tonight, because we had one other panelist who couldn't make it. Her name is Wendy. And so he's going to talk a little bit about her work and then talk about his own work. So I'm going to let Titus go ahead with his slides.
All right, let's take it away. So yes, I'm here for Wendy Lutsky to talk about the Friends of the Manitowoc River Watershed and their beach cleanups. Wendy is there on the left in the white jacket, and that's Kim Kettner on the right side in yellow, and they are the kind of founders of the Friends of the Manitowoc River Watershed. So they have been coordinating at least 2 beach cleanups per year for 10 years. So 2012 to 2022. And this is kind of all our beaches in Manitowoc, from on the farthest south end, Silver Creek Park. And that's been the one that I have personally with my family been out there every year since 2013. My kids have gotten quite a bit bigger from actually they're in this lower right picture. They're very small there, and now they are one of them's in high school and they're much larger, so they can actually clean up a lot more litter with me now. So over this time period, over 7,600 pounds of litter has been taken off the beach. I just threw in some different examples of the types of things that you might see on the beach. I've got my little and actually, Amy, there's some Nurdles in here, right down here on the bottom. So these little round things, but this is just sort of my all the things that we typically see on the beach. There's a fishing lure here. There's fireworks. There is styrofoam. There's little pieces of styrofoam. There's little pieces of plastic, and that's really the type of stuff that we see pretty typically out on there. One of the interesting idea or things that I've always found was really interesting was, I'm going to bring this up. This is my tray full of shotgun shells and the wadding from shotgun shells. So because we have waterfowl hunting offshore in Lake Michigan, we just tend to see a lot of this debris in this area. So what the Friends of the Manitowoc River do is, go out there, clean up a lot of the kind of big waste. So in that 7,000 pounds are, big things like tires, like big pieces of wood, construction equipment, and those are pretty heavy, but it's also the smaller stuff that doesn't weigh a lot, but there is a lot more of it. So and I think when Sarah talks about kind of the, what the top things that are seen across the Great Lakes by the Alliance folks, we're going to see similar things on our beaches too. So cigarette butts, small pieces of styrofoam, food wrappers, small pieces of plastic are all pretty typical in what we see in the spring, in the fall. We see a lot of different types of stuff. One of the things that FMRW has been doing recently is actually sending those cigarette butts off to a company that will recycle them, actually pull out the components, and they can actually turn because cigarette butts actually have kind of a plastic inside. That's what the filter is made out of. So it's not like when you throw it out the window, it's going to not just degrade, it's going to probably wash into the lake, sit on the beach, and it takes somewhere in the range of 5 years to actually break down. So there are these companies now turning those into things like park benches, like picnic tables. So, a really kind of cool reuse of those products. Some of the FMRW members will actually have started taking their recyclables to different counties, like Outagamie County, where they actually accept more plastics, more types of plastics. So they'll actually, put that effort in to leave the county and get those things recycled. So that, I think definitely a message as we get going is, know what you can recycle, because not everything's recyclable. And if you start, just throwing stuff in, it's actually might end up more stuff going into the landfill. So important to kind of know what you're doing. One of the kind of ultimate goals that the Friends of the Manitowoc River Watershed are trying to do is to really end and reduce the use of single-use plastics, and really get people to reuse and reduce those plastics and in their daily life. So really making those commitments. It's not just about beach cleanups, though. This group also has adopted Lower Shooty Park, which is located in the city of Manitowoc. Go check it out. It's right on the Manitowoc River, has a great stretch of the Ice Age Trail in it. And so they're out there every month doing a walkthrough, making sure everything looks great. There aren't any issues. If there are, they can report those to the city, and the city can take care of it. They've also been doing invasive species projects, other types of projects at the park. They, in addition to beach cleanups, will actually do river kind of bank cleanups. And I think they actually recovered a sofa or a couch one time. So there is this picture that exists of a canoe with this couch on it, because they, I will admit that I also have, you see this stuff, you want to pull it out, and I have, gone into the water to pull out tires from Lake Michigan, just because you want to get that cleaned up. And also, if you're weighing stuff, tires are where it's at. And one of the other things at Lower Shooty Park is an ADA accessible kayak and canoe launch. So, get down there, check out the river, get to know the river. It's not just something you look at when you drive over a bridge. It's, actually a great area to explore. So that is, that's what Wendy's been up to and what the FMRW have been up to. If you want to learn more, look them up on Facebook. You can just look up Friends of the Manitowoc River Watershed.
Great. Thank you so much. And I think, Tim, you can go ahead and move to the next slide then.
All right. Now I'm going to talk about my own stuff. And in the theme that I was just talking about, bottom right there's my, kind of trophy shot. You get people with their trophy deer or, their trophy hunting. That is a trophy tire that we pulled out at the last beach cleanup. So of course I set the timer on my phone and took a picture of it because why not? So I want to talk about two different kind of marine debris related projects that I've worked on over my 10 years with Wisconsin Sea Grant. So starting on the left, just kind of a two-part project that was looking at what are called ghost nets or derelict fishing gear. So, as you may not know, and maybe you do know, there is commercial fishing on the Great Lakes, and that is, going out into the lakes, harvesting fish. So those can be sold. And what can happen with that, that gear can sometimes be lost because of, sometimes it's poor decision-making by the fishermen, but it can also be a whole different bunch of factors. So it's, it can happen accidentally. And once those nets are lost, and they're basically, mainly we're talking about gill nets here. So it's kind of this mesh, almost like a fence that the fish don't see. It's made out of this monofilament. So if you imagine a fishing line in these little squares, and the fish will swim along, they get entangled in it, and then the fishermen can harvest that fish, and then we can eat it at our Friday night fish fry. But if you look at that picture on the upper left, that is a ghost net. So that is a net that has been lost. Once it's lost, it's just sort of on its own. So it's a ghost. It kind of can continue to fish, but it can also be a hazard for boaters and for anglers. And what I'm showing there is a lot of different logos, and really what I want to emphasize with marine debris projects, it is really a team effort. It is not just one group going out and doing stuff. It is a lot of groups working together. So what we actually did was work with this is mainly on Lake Superior. So we kind of worked with an angling group, with a tribal law enforcement group who, the tribes they work with, that was the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission. And we had funding from NOAA, which is kind of where the agency that funds Wisconsin Sea Grant. It funds Russ's work with the National Marine Sanctuary as well. And so we brought these groups together and, really started addressing on one side what anglers would do if they encountered one of these ghost nets. And so that is the picture below that in part two. That was actually creating a ghost net marking kit. So anglers are basically out there. We've crowdsourced them because they have hooks, they have lines, and they can easily encounter these types of debris that, aren't marked anymore. We don't know where they are. But what do you do when you encounter them? So, there's a safety issue here, especially on Lake Superior. The conditions can change really quickly and you can get into trouble. So we wanted to make sure people knew what to do and then how to mark those nets, because basically what our marking kit was with this kind of weighted hook with a line and a float. And so you could actually, mark that net when you freed yourself, record the coordinates, and then you contact either the Natural Resource Agency, the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, and those law enforcement folks can go out and actually find those nets. So, it was all about making this process more efficient. And, it was partnerships and I think really talking about an issue that isn't a huge issue in the Great Lakes, but it's definitely something that is out there. And I think the way we were able to communicate this was, just kind of talking about the issue. And, some of the different folks who were, setting those nets started to kind of think about, ways to not lose their nets, because that is costly for them as well. So, that was some great work up in Lake Superior. Actually was able to take me out to work with different kind of, at an international marine debris conference. So we're talking, the little Great Lakes fisheries, and then the worldwide global fisheries and ghost nets. So pretty great opportunity. And I think we made some pretty meaningful impacts. In the middle there, I also wanted to mention and talk a bit about the Great Lakes Marine Debris Action Plan. And so that is a sequence of two different plans. The first one starting back in 2014, running for 5 years. And then we are now in a 2020 Marine Debris Action Plan. So we're in the second plan. And this is really, again, it's about the cooperation. It's about partnerships. We really work together to kind of identify, putting these plans together. And, this is 30 plus agencies, cities, municipalities, researchers, agencies, all kind of working together to look at 4 broad goals. So we looked at research, what was the research that was needed, what gaps needed to be filled. The second goal was looking at management and approaches that are science-based to managing marine debris. The third was prevention and education. And the fourth was removal, and then tracking those removals. And, within the first plan, so I actually was able, because I was invited to take part in the first plan, developing that because of my marine debris ghost network. And then kind of stuck through that, the Great Lakes Sea Grant Network. So there are, within the 8 states of the Great Lakes, there are actually 8 different programs, and we actually have a Sea Grant program in Lake Champlain as well. So if you remember that weird time for a few weeks when Lake Champlain was a Great Lake, that was because they wanted to create a Sea Grant program. And they were a Great Lake technically for a while, and now they're just a really great lake, really good lake. But, scale wise, they're just not as big. So, within this first Marine Debris Action Plan, we had 53 different actions that we laid out. Lots of different partners were kind of on the hook for doing that work. And we were able to complete 34 of those. So 34 out of 53 is pretty good. And at the end, we were still working on 17. Moving into the second plan, the 2020 plan, which is what we're working on now. So we kind of, took some of those actions we didn't finish, put them in here, decided if they needed to move forward. And if they didn't, we, just kind of set them aside for now. So now we're in this second 5-year period. There's sort of accountability for this. There's different agencies, different groups that are leaders for these different things. And, you basically report every year, and hopefully at the end, we'll kind of check all the boxes and get all this stuff done. It's, it's a huge issue, and that's what we're going to talk about. But, it takes a lot of work to just kind of stay ahead of it and do what we can. So that is my kind of intro to a few different marine debris things that I've been up to.
Thank you so much, Titus.
One quick comment from the disembodied voice, first appearance this evening. Just wanted to make, someone had submitted a comment, and it was about what Titus had said about Lower Shooty Park. But their comment was, Lower Shooty is one of my favorite places in nature, great for dragonfly and damselfly hunting. I'll be cleaning up there from now on. So I just thought I'd share that now before we got too far beyond Lower Shooty Park.
Excellent.
And I assume the next slide is what you would prefer at this point.
Yes, I believe it's Sarah next. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have to unmute myself. Sorry about that. So basically, I'm going to talk mostly about the Adopt a Beach. The Adopt a Beach program is something that anyone, anywhere around the Great Lakes can get involved with. Basically, it started in 1991 as part of the International Coastal Cleanup in Illinois and Michigan only. And because of the enthusiasm of the program, it's spread to every Great Lakes beach with tens and thousands of volunteers every year. With the Adopt a Beach program, we're able to remove litters from the beaches that could potentially, that either came in from the lake, blew to the lake, but to get that off the beach so the pieces of litter won't degrade any further, and also help just protect the wildlife. Like the other day I was at the beach with my dogs, and the first thing they're doing, it had been a big storm surge, and they're grabbing every plastic, anything that you could imagine. So, you know, if you love your dog, it's another reason to get involved with the beach cleanups. But obviously it harms all kinds of things, birds, etc. So in this year, in 2022, we were able to pick up 502,754 pieces of litter. That is anywhere from large items, like Titus talked about, like the big tires, all the way down to little things that we call tiny trash. The interesting thing is that about 80%, 81% for this year is all plastic, all kinds of plastic, whether it's bottles, the filters that Titus talked about, and cigarettes, which cigarettes themselves weren't prevalent this year. What we saw a lot was the plastic tip filters that go on the cigarettes, straws, plastic bottles, plastic bottle lids, and then other materials which are generally somehow connected with food, or a lot of things that are beach related, like toys and those kinds of things. As far as the tiny trash, again, I talked about that a little bit, but what happens is a lot of those bigger pieces just break down smaller and smaller and smaller, obviously, and the smaller they get, the actual more harm that they can do. And Gavin's probably going to talk about that a little bit, because they can attract other pollutants. But one of the most important things about the Alliance for the Great Lakes process, which you can find at the greatlakes.org adopt, they basically train everybody. I was trained as an ambassador for the process in which the Alliance for Great Lakes does it. But one of the most important things is that they collect all the data. So you become a citizen science. And what I've learned for myself, and as I run these programs, and now I've been going into schools and businesses afterwards, is that once you go out and do a cleanup, you can't unsee what's going on the beaches. And then you start to think about how to incorporate that in the rest of your life. And then the data also, you actually have a sheet that you tabulate everything that you find. And the process that I've used as an ambassador is I actually have people take reusable buckets, go out, pick up whatever they can find, and then bring it back, and we dump it and we sort it so people can see sort of the collective impact of what the cleanup would be, and so that the individual isn't just walking away just seeing their bucket. And you know, many times you'll see like hundreds of straws, hundreds of bottle caps, all kinds of broken up beach toys, all kinds of different pieces of plastic. So and I feel like I'm going off on a little tangent here, but all of the training can be found on the website. And you can lead a beach cleanup, you can join a beach cleanup, and all of the information is there. Many times, if you go on the Adopt a Beach website, you can find something that's already running in your local area and just join it and get involved. Winter, obviously, around the Great Lakes is a little bit tricky because it could be frozen. Where I am right now, I'm in Illinois. It's not that cold and the beaches are not frozen. So I was able to do a big cleanup the other day when my dogs were finding all the garbage. So let me see what else. So as I mentioned, we find lots and lots of plastic. And one of the challenges that we face that we'll be talking a lot more about is that the Rochester Institute of Technology estimates that over 22 million pounds of plastic enters the Great Lakes every year, and that this can cause lots of harm to our ecosystem, wildlife, and the Great Lakes communities, some of which Titus talked about already, but things that it can tangle wildlife, it can hurt our dogs. We know that there's plastic in drinking water now, and ingesting plastics is terrible. We don't have all of the research on that now, but we do know that many times animals will ingest plastic instead of, and their bellies will be full, and so they won't get food for the nutrients to sustain their life the way that they should. The other thing is all this plastic, it can prevent visitors or tourists from coming and using a beach, which can cause economic impact to communities as well as property values. So if you live near a beach that's really messy and getting a lot of garbage, your property value is probably going to go down. So the tiny litter has been a big challenge for us because of the fact that when you're doing the cleanup at Adopt a Beach, I actually started bringing sifters, because if you just walk the beach, you look for the big stuff. You look for the, and it feels so satisfying to get like cans and bottles and, tires and whatever, benches, things that you can find. But the real harm is those little teeny tiny pieces. And so for many of the cleanups, you can go out, if you just get like a kitchen strainer or sifter, you can, I've spent a lot of times with kids and actually companies where you pick up the sand and you sift and you start to see the little tiny pieces. And one of the big challenges with tiny trash, little pieces, is that these microscopic pieces can basically degrade and get into the water, and the Great Lakes provides drinking water for over 40 million people. So that starts to get a little bit scarier when you start to think about that. This plastic, it's terrible that it's on the beach, but it may actually impact our health. So that's something that we need to start to think about, and need to probably get more research to fully understand what's going on. Some of the big things that we've seen, a lot of people have heard a lot, and this is something I've been talking about. I was at a presentation the other day you hear a lot about the ocean and the ocean plastic and the Five Gyres and all that stuff. But many people in the Great Lakes region think, well, that doesn't impact me, that's away. Well, there is similarities, but a little bit more hope is that for the Great Lakes area, all the trash that is in the Great Lakes comes from the Great Lakes area. And so we did it so we can look for ways to prevent it. And it's going to take a big collaborative effort, but it's really important for us to know that we can have more of an impact. And the other thing that's kind of interesting that we need more research on is, how does the plastic impact our water differently? Because our lakes generally, if we get the cold winter, freeze, where the oceans don't fully freeze. And does that have an impact on greater or worse? So a lot more research needs to be done on that. As far as getting involved, there's lots of ways to get involved. As I mentioned, Great Lakes.org adopt, greatlakes.org plastic. You can find out more about the plastic and ways that you can help. You can also write letters to your public officials via the Alliance for Great Lakes website that would help you. It's basically that there's a form letter that you can go in and you can change it, but if you put in your zip code, it'll pull up who your local officials are. And it actually, currently there's a letter there about, I believe it's particularly about tiny trash and Nurdles. So that's pretty helpful. So one thing that's kind of interesting that happened this past summer when I was out running a beach cleanup is I worked with a corporation. It happened to be a large beverage corporation that has many brands of beer. And their team came out to do a cleanup, and it happened to be right after the Air and Water Show in Chicago. And they came out and they were cleaning up, and they were all coming back with their buckets and like heads down, a little bit sheepish. And I was like, what's going on? Dump your bucket, let's see. And they're like, oh my gosh, our brands are so well represented in there. It's embarrassing. And I was like, well, what can we do, right? And so it's kind of neat that they immediately started to come up with ideas right there on the spot of things that they might be able to do. So that's another thing the Alliance can do, is go back and work with those teams to help them determine changes to make for particularly the public-facing use of plastics, like no more plastic cups at street festivals, right? Like those kinds of things. So
thank you so much, Sarah.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly pipe in that our citizen science project doing this Nurdle patrol is also collaborating with the Alliance, and we're doing beach cleanups every time we do a Nurdle patrol. That's so terrific. if anybody in the area wants to get involved, we've already done 3 beach cleanups, one in September, October, and November. And once the weather gets nicer again, we will bring them back. So we're hoping for March, but we'll have to watch the weather and decide if we can do March or if we have to push it off until April. But we'll do for sure April, May, and then hopefully also June. So again, if you want to get involved locally, we'll be working with the Alliance on a beach cleanup and Nurdle patrols at least once a month, but you can also do your own, and it's a really great program. We're going to move on to Gavin. It should be the next slide. I'm sorry, Gavin, I'm not hearing you. Can you?
Yeah, Gavin, we can't hear you.
Hear me yet?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Oh,
Thank you.
all right. Let's try this again.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, so Gavin again, I am your emerging contaminant scientist. So we're going to talk a little bit about kind of how these microplastics kind of exist in the Great Lakes and kind of what impacts they could potentially have on our aquatic plants, our aquatic animals, etc. So one thing I always like to point out first is, as Sarah had started to kind of mention, is the differences in sizes, right? So we can get, large plastics, get into it all the way from ghost nets, as Titus was explaining, all the way to, tiny trash, and then even further down. So you can get microplastics, which is kind of depicted here in the bottom right, kind of looking at, very, very small, but they can get even smaller. They can get to your nanoplastics. So kind of even these plastics that you really can't even see. And what's most important about this is that each size of trash or each size of these microplastics, they can have some dramatically different impacts on our aquatic ecosystems. Obviously you think about straws, sometimes, they're consumed by animals and you can see that kind of direct impact. But some of these microplastics and nanoplastics, they can have some of these, what we like to call sublethal impacts, or impacts that are impacting different systems in the body, whether that be, organs, endocrine systems, et cetera, which I'd love to talk more about. So we have these giant range of different sizes. They can be extremely small. They can be, the large ones that we can see. But what's most important about these microplastics and nanoplastics that exist out there is they affect every single part of our ecosystem. So they can attach to our phytoplanktons, they can attach to the zooplankton, and then what they will do is, as that zooplankton moves up the food web, right, the zooplankton gets eaten by fish, that fish gets eaten by another fish, et cetera, all the way up to potentially our ospreys and every other animal that's in our ecosystem. That plastic is just continuing to grow, right, or continuing to accumulate in our different animals and plants. And so what I study a lot of really is trying to look at what is going on, not only where are these microplastics and what are those microplastics that are there, but what's happening to our different plants and animals that are in our system. And sometimes when you think about microplastics and we think about contaminants, the easiest thing for us to think or see is those lethal impacts, right? You hear about like, oh, this was added to the water, we found this and it killed all the fish, or it killed the ospreys, etc. But that's just one big thing. What's really happening a lot more often is those sublethal impacts that we were talking about. And those can range, a wide variety of what could be happening. But those are really what we kind of are hoping to study as we continue to move forward. And the last thing I just kind of wanted to mention, and Sarah started to kind of bring this up, is these microplastics themselves, they are a contaminant. But what really they can also do is they can be a guide or an attachment for other contaminants that are found in the ecosystem, right? So we know a lot about, if you go back in the days, we have our PCBs, PDBEs. These are other contaminants that have been found in the Great Lakes. There's the really famous one going back to the 1960s of DDT. So these are your pesticides, your herbicides, etc. And then the big famous one that's out right now that we're continuing to learn is PFAS, or per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. And what can happen is these different contaminants that are found in the water, they will actually attract to the microplastics. So they are kind of that source potentially, not only a contaminant themselves, but also attracting these other contaminants that could also have impacts on the ecosystem. So not only when you kind of get out there and you're doing beach cleanups, etc., all this stuff is great because you're both taking out this pollution, but we're also kind of alleviating some of this stressor, this contaminant stressor that could be having impacts on those non-target animals like our plants and animals in our aquatic ecosystems. And I will gladly, to any questions about any contaminants, but I like to kind of keep it brief and short. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Gavin. I appreciate that. We're going to move on to the last slide from Russ.
Hi, it's Russ again, bat and cleanup here. And so I'll be kind of quick, but I'm glad I'm bat and cleanup tonight because I learned a lot about plastics, and my wheels are turning about ways that the Marine Sanctuary can help support this work. So we're a marine protected area. You can see the map there running from Port Washington up to two rivers. And, we're focused on these historic shipwrecks. I wouldn't even say predominantly. Those are the main feature that they're nationally significant. They tell our national story of westward expansion and immigration, and innovation, the men and the women that built this nation through the lens of these shipwrecks and the real places that exist because of the cold fresh water. You can see a shot at the top there of the pretty typical preservation. We have a real opportunity to understand and share our heritage. But I'll stop there. That's a different presentation entirely. We're on the water a lot, and so there are lots of ways that we can double dip on the research we do. And sanctuaries, there's kind of four main ways we manage these places: research, resource protection, education, and community engagement. And so this idea of broadening the sanctuary scope to include other conservation efforts is really part and parcel with NOAA's mission and mandate. And so being able to focus that here in Wisconsin is really great. As I mentioned, we're about 1.5 years old, and we've been on the water, starting to bring in some resources to get some work done. And Tim, I think I've got one more slide. I cheated. I did 2 here. The archaeologist said to have 2 slides. That tells you how sharp we are as archaeologists. But this idea, you can see a map here of the marine sanctuary system. So there's 15 national marine sanctuaries, and Sarah mentioned awareness of the ocean, and indeed on the West Coast and down in the Florida Keys, our program is really engaged in beach cleanups and looking at some of these kind of health issues for the oceans. Here we are in the Great Lakes. There are actually 2 marine sanctuaries in the Great Lakes, and so we're focused on heritage, but we're able to bring some of this awareness, this national awareness to this area for a variety of reasons. And I'll share one quick example with you. We were able to map most of the sanctuary this year in high resolution with sonar. And believe it or not, many of the charts for the Great Lakes are from the 40s and 50s. So it was time to update these charts. And the Office of Coast Survey that does this work said, hey, we have this brand new area in Wisconsin that NOAA manages. Let's bring some of those resources to bear to map that area so we can improve safety of commercial shipping and for boaters. But the other thing we can do with this information is create habitat maps. So we can help folks like Titus do their work. Many of the kind of food chain and some of the issues we see on the natural side in the Great Lakes, begins at that lake bed interface. So knowing what that substrate is like and what's living there and what's growing there can be really important. And so our next step is to take all that data and turn it into habitat maps so folks like Titus can use those to do their work. And along the way, we bring all kinds of partners in to do this work. And you can see some examples on the bottom just this past year that were different technologies working in the sanctuary. So I'll leave it there. And we're excited about figuring out, finding ways for us to collaborate and help protect Lake Michigan, because we're just as interested in the broader conservation as we are in the heritage here. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Russ. So I want to thank all of our panelists for giving us a great background on the issues and things that we want to be working on in the Great Lakes. And hopefully people are submitting some questions and things for us to talk about. But to get the ball rolling, I'd like to start with kind of a general question that anybody can answer. What are the specific issues that we see in Lake Michigan that maybe are unique to Lake Michigan, as opposed to other freshwater systems, or as opposed to ocean systems? What makes our system unique, and what are those unique things that we see here?
Well, I guess I'll start talking, and I'll come up with an answer once I talk for long enough, maybe. Yeah, I think it is sort of the, and this was mentioned earlier, it is the contained nature of our system. I mean, it is a defined watershed, and that does mean that we can, really kind of focus on what the sources are, and I think that is a key. It is, I think in general we know where all this stuff is coming from, and I think we can do things about that. So whether that's just on whatever scale we're talking about, if it's litter that's washing in, but it's also that small, the fibers in the laundry, like there are I think a lot of opportunities here to actually start on this Great Lakes scale to reduce how much litter is out there and how much plastics in general.
I'd say the one thing I'd also add about what maybe not Lake Michigan itself, but kind of the Great Lakes, is they're also a water source, right? There is that human the human need for it, compared to your ocean, right? We're not drinking our ocean water, but we are actually drinking, water that's coming directly from Lake Michigan. So that is kind of another reason of why it's so unique. It has that much more importance to us. So it kind of adds to the whole thing.
Yeah, I think I don't remember if I said it, but 40 million people depend on Lake Michigan water for drinking water, which is pretty unique in the sense that we need to be thinking about how to keep it safe and clean for everybody. And I think the thing that I've learned doing beach cleanups and talking to people and going to schools, and whether it's like the on the ground, getting dirty, talking to people who've never even thought about it before, that they haven't thought about the fact that maybe there's something that they could do or change to help, right? And I had a woman the other day say to me, I hear about ocean stuff all the time, but when you tell me that you're finding 100 straws on the beach, I love my straw, but maybe that makes me think that that's the beach I like to go to. And if the straws are ending up on my beach, then maybe I should think about stop using a straw or buying metal straws that I could continue to reuse. Or then she started asking me all these questions because she's like, oh, it's near me. It matters to me. It's not like out there somewhere. So I think that is a big part of it too. And there's so many things that people can do that they don't know and they don't realize. And I think that it makes it unique too, that there's actual change that you could start to see. And I mean, with the research, with, what Titus and Gavin both were talking about, I don't know how or when we could start to see that, but I think there's a lot of research that can continue to happen to see how those impacts affect. Like the Alliance for Great Lakes has this year marked the 500,000 pounds of trash pulled off the beaches. Like we don't have a pre to that, like what is the impact of that? We don't know, but those are the kinds of things that would be interesting to find out.
Yeah, and of course the downer here, maybe I shouldn't say it, but the estimate is that there's 22 million pounds of plastic coming into the Great Lakes every year. So it is a hard battle, but
yeah.
Keep cleaning up and
right.
And keep let's keep that from ending up in the Great Lakes to start with, so we don't have to clean it up.
Right.
And I'm going to toss in a comment that leads to a question that's been submitted. And My apologies if I mispronounce anything. Even as a disembodied voice, I should pronounce things correctly. But if I do mispronounce something, please feel free to correct me. But Natalie said, after studying plastic pollution down in Florida this summer, it's crazy to hear about the pollution in the Great Lakes because it's true. You don't hear about freshwater plastic pollution. Thank you for your work, though. It's amazing to hear about the citizen science and organizations working on protecting Lake Michigan, which leads into the next question really nicely. John said, plastics contain chemical additives that can leach out of them as they degrade. Phthalates, flame retardants, biphenyls, dyes, and many others. I am curious if these show up in the food webs or the water.
So I'll take the lead on this one, at least to start. So the very short answer, yes, they do. They, as you kind of get into it, the biggest one of where you start to see a lot of this stuff is actually in our water and soils, or sediment. Sorry, I forget we're in the water here. So we are seeing a lot of these things. So your flame retardants, your phthalates, biphenyls, dyes, PFAS, et cetera, all these contaminants, we are seeing them coming in. Even microplastics as well, right? Where they're coming in through our tributaries, direct contamination into the lake, runoff. There's a whole bunch of different places of where they could come from. But what's different when you get from specific contaminants is how much you start to see them in the food web. And what I mean by that is each one of these contaminants has different bioaccumulation rates, or different rates of which they're being absorbed or taken up by each individual animal or plant as they go up the food web. And what's really interesting is some of these contaminants, they can be large or very high accumulators, meaning they can kind of biomagnify, or kind of as you get to higher trophic levels, those concentrations of the contaminants really start to shoot up, or they can just kind of really not accumulate in animals. So certain contaminants will just really, they don't add up. They're in the animal, but they don't increase over time or increase as you go up the food web. So each one of those contaminants that you had mentioned, plus the 10 other thousand that exists out there, they kind of all have their unique attributes, but we do see them in the water, we see them in the soil, the sediment, and we see them in the food web, just potentially at different rates. That's a fantastic question.
Yeah, and I'd throw in, it is the challenge here, and we've heard, microplastics ending up in fish. It is, how do you document the actual impacts? And that is the hard part. I mean, I think microplastics has been something on my radar for a while now, but it is like, how do you demonstrate that on an actual organism? You might be able to do it in the lab, but then the next step is actually, how do we, what does this mean in actually the environment out in Lake Michigan right now? Because it's not just, one thing. It's not just microplastics. It's all the other contaminants. It's the food web things. It's very complex. And that's, as an ecologist, that's generally where my answers end up. It's like, well, here's what we think, but really, we don't know enough yet. So, that can be hard. And for those levels, for the, at least for drinking water, I mean, the EPA does have, there are standards set for a lot of these things. And, so at least there's an eye on, kind of safe concentrations that we want to maintain. But again, the challenge is that there's just so many, if the science hasn't been done to demonstrate the impact yet, or that it is harmful, there aren't going to be standards for it. And unfortunately, that's kind of how the US, or, North America, I guess, has kind of chose to monitor things. It's, we ended up with it in the environment, and maybe we find out later that it's harmful. So not great.
Which leads right into another question that had been submitted previously before we even started tonight. But how can we reduce microplastic pollution?
That's the $1 million question, right?
Yeah. Do you have $1 million answer?
I wish I did. As I kind of always like to say is like the biggest way that you can try to reduce your microplastic pollution, as a start, it's not a perfect answer, but is that kind of reusing things, getting rid of or getting away from any single plastic, anything. We've kind of brought this up before, kind of in our own conversations, but even like bins, right? They're not a single-use bin. We're using this for multiple different resources, etc. But kind of always finding a way to reuse something or having multiple sources for one thing, at least helps reduce that single-use plastic. And I know it's not $1 million solution, but maybe it's a penny solution moving forward.
Yeah, I think another thing is, packaging, how as consumers, we buy stuff all the time. And the more you learn about microplastic and plastic in general, the more you're going to be thoughtful about what you buy, what it's wrapped in. If you can buy things that are not in plastic, we were talking about before, the water and safe drinking water. And a lot of people start to think, well, I'm just going to buy bottled water because it's safer. Well, the truth is, it's in plastic, and everything that you talked about with the chemistry, well, maybe it's not maybe it's not so safe. There's plastic leaching into that water, which is worse than somebody told a story about an orange the other day, about unwrapping the orange and putting it in a plastic container. And it, don't buy that orange that they unwrapped and put it in a plastic container. Buy the orange that has a natural wrap around it, right? So packaging is one of the biggest issues too, just that we can, as a consumer, be more thoughtful about the choices that you make. Many times now I'll go to the grocery store and I'll be like, what's in glass? I'll buy the glass stuff, right? Because I know that I can take that back and reuse it. And it is really challenging, but I think the more people can vote with their dollars, the more companies are going to be forced to do that. There's a number of companies popping up with cleaning products that are, it's a little tablet instead of the big Tide bin, or there's so many little things out there, and some of it you have to do your research. But I think if you start with one thing that you're going to focus on, that you're going to try, for instance, that lady that was telling me about the straws, she's like, I'm going to try not to use a straw all month. And I was like, great. And then, if she can do that, then maybe that'll start making her think about the next thing. And, any little thing like the stirrers from Starbucks, ask for no stirrer, like just little things. Use your own container, use your own drinking bottle for water or coffee or whatever. So there's many, many things. And actually, a lot of organizations post these things on their websites. The Alliance has some. I know that Sea Grant has an incredible program across the Great Lakes region. And it's all about, it's like called Trash Talk. And it's, there's lots of information as far as little things you can do, as make sure you don't leave trash overflowing from your garbage can is one thing, right? Because that's going to get picked up by the water or by the wind and get taken into. So there's many, many, many things, and perhaps we can put something together at the end of this talk to post at the library, if that makes sense, on the library site, to help people just with a quick guide. But we can do something. I mean, we have to believe that each of us have a role, right? And we're going to do a little something. So
yeah, and I have, I think one of the main, microfibers. So I like to hike. I've got a lot of, kind of fancy hiking and adventure gear. But you know what fleece is? It is just made out of little plastic fibers. And every time you wash that, those fibers, go through the washing machine, they go down the drain, and wastewater treatment plants are not built to catch fibers. They are built to catch the solids, to treat the wastewater in a way that it means it's safe to discharge. But things like those little microfibers from your clothes, that they don't really pick that up. They pick up some of it, although a lot of those solids then get spread on land. So, where's that going to end up? It's probably going to still end up in the water. So one of the things that I've been doing at my house was installing a filter that, it's basically this bag, and it's actually a company that makes these filters for originally for septic systems. So you don't want, if you're, out in the country, you have a septic field, you don't want to discharge a bunch of fibers and large things into your septic field because it'll get clogged. You've got to have someone come out, spend a lot of money to have it, fixed or pumped out. So they've actually pivoted to also, market their product towards this actually catching these fibers. And researchers at the University of Toronto have did a project up in Lake Huron at a Georgian Bay city, and they, basically took out these, brought these filters there. People installed them in their laundry rooms, and then they kind of documented the amount that was being caught. And we're talking, it's not 100%, it's not foolproof, but if we're catching 60 to 80% of those fibers, they're going into my garbage can. They are not going into Lake Michigan, which is then where I get my drinking water. So, I think that is something that you can do from home. And also, as you're aware of that, you can also say, hey, Whirlpool company or washing machine companies, why don't we have filters that catch these things? Because, you're discharging this pollutant basically. So, I think it's first is awareness, then it is, doing something about it. And then it is using your voice to really, go to the, to those manufacturers, and to the plastic industry, really, recycling is important, but a lot of stuff isn't that recyclable. And, why is it our job? If you're making these products, maybe you should take a little more active role in recycling. So, that's use our voice and, reduce these problems.
There's another question that just came in that sort of touches on this. And Kaylin wondered, how do we as citizens make people more aware of the dangers of microplastics, just as everyday people out and about? What's a good way of going about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, that's where I usually say, well, they're probably harmful, but we don't really know what those impacts are specifically. And that really makes it a challenge to say, don't do this, but we also don't really know, we can't really quantify. That's the scientist's answer.
Yeah, I'll jump in for it, Titus here. So I think he's hit the nail right on the head. It is hard to quantify all the the dangers of these microplastics, but I think how you kind of make people more aware of it, and potential of these potential dangers is to just be able to talk about it, all the time. It can these conversations can easily come up about using a straw. Do we need to use a straw? And they can all have leadways into talking into kind of how we know that these microplastics are getting into our aquatic ecosystems. We know that these aquatic or these microplastics are then getting into our plants and animals. And then, I like to kind of say this is a lot of us do consume plants and animals that come directly from our Great Lakes. And guess what? If it's in the fish that you're consuming, you are now consuming that microplastic. So I kind of always like to try to have that conversation with people of explaining you're not really just putting it into the environment. If you fish or if you even drink the water, right? If it gets into that ecosystem, then it potentially is getting into yourself. And I think that's sometimes a really easy way to make that connection with other people, is saying like, it's not just impacting the aquatic ecosystem. It could be impacting you, your friends, your families, etc. So I like to always try to add that, as we talk about it as much as we can.
Great, thank you.
Oh,
sorry.
Please go ahead. No, you.
I was just going to say that Titus says that he might have a question. So I would love to welcome him to ask that.
All right, Russ, I got a question for you because, you're you're the odd one out, I guess. So I'm looking at that beautiful shipwreck behind you, and you're a diver. So two-part question. First, do you see a lot of debris and litter around shipwrecks when you're diving on them? And then two, what are things that scuba diving folks could do? It seems like they've got unique skills, able to go under the water where we're just on the beaches. So what superpowers in marine debris do you have?
Well, I mean, it's a good question about using divers, because often we're kind of like gophers, right? So a brilliant scientist like yourself or Gavin says, I got this great idea. You got to take this contraption down to 10 feet where we think these microplastics might be accumulating, and do X, Y, and Z. So I think that skill set, that special ability to put a person underwater to do science. Maybe it's something in the sediment. We do that quite a bit. We've done that in Lake Huron quite a bit with sinkhole research, with different cyanobacteria that's emerging in sinkholes where there's a lot of sulfur, and you can actually learn a ton about it, and it's much easier to do when you're in person. So I would think the in-personness of being able to dive and conduct science underwater could be helpful. Well, on shipwrecks themselves, we do see nets. We certainly see lots of derelict gear. I mean, some of these shipwrecks were discovered in the 60s and 70s. And over time, people will put a polypro line on it so that they can find it again with a marker on the surface. So we'll see quite a bit of old polypro line. In fact, we'll have a project next year to start scooping that stuff up and bringing it out of the lake. I mean, that's what's best for the shipwreck. But I think, this ability of merging our forces so that there's a science question, and maybe we have some folks that can help do the field work would be fantastic. So Gavin, let us know where you want us to go and what you want us to do.
Sounds great. To add to Titus's question, maybe part 3 is, what do any of these shipwrecks, are they contributing potentially to some of these microplastics that we're finding, or that are getting into the ecosystem, or is it a very small, portion potentially? Just maybe elaborate a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think hopefully pretty minimal. Most of them are wood and iron, and some are steel. So it's there aren't too many sort of man-made sort of plastic type pieces on these for sure. But as you're talking, I was just thinking about some other research we've done with zebra mussels and invasive mussels, where scientists are looking to grab those because you can kind of pull them apart, and they're filter feeders, and there's a lot that they're eating, and it becomes part of their digestive system, and you can figure out what else is in the water column. In that case, shipwrecks, and they're all in these varying depths, right? So you can have them in 5 feet of water and 300 feet of water. And so you can learn something about what's moving through zebra mussels in this case, and therefore the lake water at all of these different control points. And so we've done quite a bit of that. And there are plenty of zebra mussels on shipwrecks to sample from.
Quagga mussels, Russ.
Quaggas, that's right.
Quagga.
It's a new day. I'm old, Titus.
Since we're talking about the marine sanctuaries, I have a question about, is there anything that we can specifically do to help keep the marine sanctuaries safe?
Well, that's a good question. One thing about that I think is really fascinating about this designation for a sanctuary here is, part of it was heritage in these amazing historic places, but a lot of it also was what else could a sanctuary bring to the table? And I had mentioned some of this. And the way sanctuaries begin and get started is through a nomination. So that in this case, the communities of Manitowoc, Two Rivers, Port Washington, and Sheboygan got together and said, hey, we think a marine sanctuary would be a really great fit here, and here are all the reasons why. So these conservation questions that we're talking about here are really part and parcel. So I think in terms of kind of protecting a sanctuary going forward, this is part of it. I mean, it's a special area of Lake Michigan. It happens to have shipwrecks in it, but it is a nationally significant place. And so continue that advocacy, continue to be a champion in your own life for the Great Lakes, no matter what, kind of floats your boat. Sorry for the pun there. But I think the marine sanctuary gets stronger when citizens are part of it. In fact, we have an advisory council that's made up of citizens from different communities and different walks of life. So we're just another player at the table. So I think being engaged and being involved in the sanctuary or anything Sea Grants are doing, or there's so many incredible conservation organizations that I've learned about on the lakeshore as we start partnering. There are a lot of people interested in protecting this lake, and there's lots of ways to get involved.
Don't release balloons. I just want to say that. If you wouldn't just go down to the beach and dump a bag of garbage in the lake, don't let a balloon go, because you know where it's going to end up? Out in the lake. And then I'm going to have to clean it up, and it'll make me mad.
Absolutely. That's one of the things my dog had yesterday. It was like a torn up Mylar balloon, rumpled up, and he thought it was so fun because it was making noise. And I'm like, and the string, too. There's a story about that too, about the piping plovers. I don't know if anybody's heard about the Monty and Rose story on Montrose Beach in Chicago, but these piping plovers that were endangered, who had not made it in a long time, they actually, one of the things that happened to them is they put an enclosure around them to keep the chicks safe, and a balloon hit the enclosure, and the parents had to go away for a little while because it scared them and endangered the babies, so that's the kind of other stuff that happens. Like, the wildlife is so impacted in so many different ways by this trash too. So anyway, look that up. It's a great story, Monty and Rose. It's a great story actually about the community coming together to, watch over these birds at the lakeshore and, sort of share the shore with all the other amazing creatures that also depend on the lake.
We've semi-touched on this, but also it asks the broader question, who tracks what trash is found on the beaches and lakes, and how do they go about, chronicling what trash they find?
Well, I mentioned earlier that the Alliance for Great Lakes does track with the actual cleanups, but obviously we don't track everything all the time. It's when there's an organized cleanup. There's also some apps out there that I think the Ocean Conservancy, I don't know if anybody else knows the answer to this, but Ocean Conservancy, there's an app where if you just go out on the cleanup, you can actually track it and it goes into a database. And I know the Alliance shares their findings with, I believe it's the Ocean Conservancy, but I don't know if and I know that NOAA also has a program that tracks large marine debris. I think they aren't focused so much on the smaller stuff. I don't know if anybody else knows, but the Alliance has the database since, I want to say 2011, maybe they started. So the database is since then, at least we can go back and look year to year what's been found. And I also mentioned that this year there was 500,000, marked the 500,000 pieces of litter collected according to the Alliance database.
Yeah, with the Ocean Conservancy, the International Coastal Cleanup, and they produce an annual report, and this is global. All these cleanups around the world. The Alliance produces kind of a report, annual stats on what those kind of top trash are, and I think, and then as someone who cleans up a single beach all the time, it's interesting to see whether it's like the beaches of Bali or, Manitowoc, Wisconsin, that kind of top 10 is pretty consistent, I think, for a lot, here in the Great Lakes globally. And I guess a plug for the Marine Debris Tracker app. That's a good one where you can actually select a bunch of different, like where the data goes, like NOAA will track some of that, but there's a lot of different projects that are tracking, litter cleanup, and kind of the nice thing with an app is that you get that GPS location for specific pieces of litter, and how important that is. As a scientist, I think knowing that it's on a beach here in Manitowoc versus it was at this location, how important is that? Probably not. I think some of the interesting, like if you spend enough time on the beach, and I think that is that is something people can do. It's not just the beach, it's your local waterways, it's, inland lakes, it's riverbanks. Just getting out there and seeing, how these change, through the year. Where does this debris end up? We see, like, if a creek is coming out, meeting the lake, you're going to see different things there just because of that, water discharging, interrupting the currents that run along the shore, because those currents kind of run parallel, and they actually move this litter. Because when we're talking about litter here, we're talking about plastics. Why do we see plastics on the beach? It's mainly because they float, and that's why they end up here. If things that sink, there's a lot of stuff that probably sinks. It's down on the bottom. We don't see it. Russ has to go out there with his scuba diver pals, and maybe
us.
they can pick that stuff up and catch it. So I think understanding that movement, and that helps to inform kind of the next steps, like how do we intercept this trash? How can we better clean it up, and prevent it from kind of moving around? So I think that's understanding the systems, understanding the behavior of these plastics in the environment, and then maybe doing a more efficient way of cleaning up, whether that's using robots or little machines on the beach that pick stuff up, or dragging the beach, or there's actually these sea bins that imagine like a bucket that you install in like a marina, and it's just kind of anchored there, but the water pours in and it kind of filters out that floating stuff. So if you have you can also say, hey, you've got a marina, you've got a lot of people here, you might have there's kind of an enclosed space, why not put these things in that will actually kind of filter out that debris, and then you can come and clean that out instead of it just floating around. So I think those are lots of different kind of interesting solutions, and a lot of cool technology that's being used more and more.
I had a question come in that sort of takes it from more of the what individuals can do to what corporations may or may not be doing. John's question was, product stewardship models are becoming more common for hard to manage wastes, where manufacturers help fund efforts to deal with the problems their products create. Is there anything like this being done with plastic pollution?
I think there is some of the marine debris action plans that I talked about. I mean, there were some folks there, from these kind of industry councils who, they have people who are, out and about on the more conservation side, who, talk about the issues, get involved with the issues. And I think on the other side is, I had a thought and it kind of went out of my head. Okay. So with the more recent marine debris action plan, we actually talked a lot more about kind of the circular economy. So that is, not just this kind of basic recycling, because the problem with a lot of recycling is, only certain types of plastics are recyclable, and what they're actually used for, it's kind of downcycled basically. Like it's not like a one-to-one recycling. Like you have this plastic bottle, you make another one, because things degrade, things are sort of less useful as they go, and eventually they're just kind of landfilled. But this kind of concept of the circular economy, where really creating the value for these different types of plastics and different reuses, rather than just kind of making new stuff, because that has been, the economics of it has been a problem in recent years, where a colleague of mine with Ohio Sea Grant, she ran the Clean Marina program there, and they had this great, if you go past a marina in the winter, you see a lot of boats with this shrink wrap on them, because it's a lot, you don't have all these buildings to store these boats in, but you can shrink wrap it. So it's fairly easy to do. And Ohio had this, this recycling program for all this shrink wrap. This company would pick it up, and but then, like, as the price of oil went down, it became just a lot. It was cheaper to make new plastic than to recycle this other plastic. So that, it's really the economics, I think, is a big challenge. I think we really need to, value this stuff more. And, maybe it's not just the cheapest option. It's also, the value to the earth and to the environment and to the Great Lakes is really a consideration. We need to value that more. Even though it might, maybe we're going to, pay a little more for our coffee because the plastic lids cost more, or we're bringing our own mugs. And it'd be great if they gave us more than just like a 5-cent discount on that. If you're listening, coffee companies.
I think that's so great. I've been thinking a lot as we've been talking about, like, I'm not a litterer, right? I don't litter. I try really hard not to ever litter. So when I get, say, a drink from a fast food restaurant and I throw that cup with the straw in the trash can, am I contributing to litter on the beaches inadvertently because I assume it's being collected and taken to the landfill, but am I making a wrong assumption? Like, maybe that's what people out in the audience are thinking too. Like, I'm not a litter bug. I do my due diligence to make sure everything goes in the trash can. Can I be assured that everything I put in the trash can is really going to make it to the landfill, or are there leaks in the system per se? Does anybody have any information about that?
Well, I can just throw out a quick, Manitowoc example. In this, so this is like a city park example. When I started the beach cleanups, back in 2013 that I was involved with, we just had these open top cans, basically just a garbage bin, which, okay, you're throwing it in there, but there's no lid on it. There's no covering. And that's kind of one of the first things you can do. Like, how enclosed are these, trash receptacles? Do dumpsters have lids on them? Because that is all, like, you need to contain it in these spaces. And I think the Friends of Manitowoc River were involved with this. They actually bought some of these garbage cans. So now they have, and I think now they've actually switched, because they have like the Parks Department has one of those trucks that auto lifts the trash cans. So now they have those, lidded trash cans and recycling cans. And that makes it, that is kind of a simple step that is probably better for the parks people, because they don't have to lift these cans. It also has a lid on it. So the trash isn't flying around. There are not animals climbing in there. So that is, you really want to be, and maybe you just take that fast food stuff, just carry all your trash with you in your car and throw it away when you get home, if you can't find a appropriate trash container. I mean, Gavin's in Madison, so they probably have, some kind of concierge garbage service on the streets, but
That'd be nice, but no. I mean, the one thing I would just add is, like, you'll notice this. Titus brought it up, is even when you throw away your garbage in your own garbage bin, there's not all of it always makes it directly into the garbage truck, right? I mean, not a lot, right, is escaping, but there still is some. And sometimes even like the stuff that's getting to the landfills, et cetera, there still will always be, you may not be directly putting your own litter directly into it, but all of this trash that we're creating, all these single plastics, they're going to add up, and some of that, regardless of if it's exactly yours or not, is going to make it to those aquatic systems. So, I mean, as much as work as you could do to, directly trying to putting it into the trash bin, if we try to take the most proactive approach, is just trying to limit the amount of, plastics trash that we can kind of use in the first place. I know that's not always the easiest thing in the world to do, but just the little things that we can start to do, they're going to add up over time. And so, everybody, as much as we can do our part, we all should continue on.
Absolutely. There's also a movement where there's going to be more reuse. I mean, I guess it started in Europe and it's happening in cities around the United States. I don't know if any of you know this, but basically that you would go in, let's say I go into Dunkin' Donuts and I would want a coffee. Well, there's basically would be a machine. I'm making this up. I don't know that Dunkin' Donuts is going to ever do this, but there would be a machine that they'd say, well, you need a cup. And so you go over and you have to pay, let's say you pay $1 deposit and you get a reusable cup. They fill it up. When you're done with it, you bring it back, it cleans it, and it's there for the next person. And so no more of this throwaway society that we have. And that, I mean, I think that that's going to be the real answer, is like getting away from being a throwaway society and figuring out ways to reuse things. It's not going to be fast. And I think the corporations that make it easy will make it change for us faster. And I think that there are a number of companies in the United States working on it right now. I don't remember the name of the companies, but I could find out if you want. But apparently it's happening in Europe all over the place. And I thought that was kind of fascinating that, you know, it's big on behavior change. And as Americans, we don't like to change our behavior. I mean, I don't, but because it's hard. But if it becomes easier and easier, we'll all be able to do it. But also back to the question before about how do you tell people about the microplastic problem? It's basically like, take them to a water source, take them, walk outside, look at the trash, like any piece you could pick up any trash anywhere that could help, right? Like walk the block. You know, a lot of times at schools, I'm like, walk around the schoolyard, all that trash out there. Where do you think, who's going to pick that up? Where's that going to go? Right. Let's think about it. So I think, like you said, Gavin, too, like any little thing that's going to help.
Yeah, and Florida Sea Grant had a great citizen science kind of microplastic, microparticle project where, you know, people were just out and, you know, you just have a 1 liter bottle, you scoop it out at, you know, your local water body, and then, you know, here are the steps that you do, you know, filter it out, put it under a microscope, and then, you know, you count the fibers and the films and the particles. I mean, so there, you know, there are great models, I think, that already exist, and it's just finding the right, you know, groups of folks to, you know, put that work in. And maybe that's something for Gavin to, you know, Gavin wants to get out more onto the coasts, and maybe you can run that program.
You know, it's interesting that you bring that up, Titus, because somebody just sent in a comment that is essentially about what you were talking about. I mean, literally. Natalie Ford wrote, I got to collect and filter ocean water to find out and identify microplastics. It was alarming to see how much was in a 10 milliliter sample of water that we snorkeled in. Would this be something that citizen science program would maybe do in the future to raise awareness? Amy?
Oh, sorry. I didn't realize that question was for me. Yeah.
I just saw citizen science and you were right in front.
Yeah, you're doing the Nurdles. So
right.
Once you get the Nurdles down, it's
then
on to microplastic.
Yeah. Yes, I think this is really interesting. And it is kind of eye-opening, isn't it, Natalie, that, you know, 10 milliliters is not very much. I mean, that's, you know, a little vial. And to see how much microplastic can be in there is really shocking, I think, to a lot of people, because then when you think about ingesting that and you think about those microplastics going into your own body, it's a little scary. And so I think the more we can make awareness of these things, the more that people will be proactive in helping to remove these things in some way, shape, or form. Is one of the largest sources of microplastics coming from the larger litter and it's just degrading over time, or do microplastics have their own sources in the environment, like how they're being delivered to the environment?
Gavin?
I was going to say that's a great question. A little bit of both. There are microplastics that are designed, even microplastics in like our shampoos, etc. So there's these micro beads that are like purposely made, as well as a large source of it is going to be degradation from other big plastics, though. So you're kind of getting that double-edged sword. You're getting it from both ends. You're getting a little bit mixed in from, you know, the breakdown products, but also like we do design specific things that have these microplastics kind of in it already. But I did want to kind of add something a little bit, backtrack to kind of this microplastic citizen science thing. And I'm currently working with a professor at Wisconsin, and her name is Dr. Hua. She's putting together this um, microplastic sampler that you could basically go out. It's a small little kit that, the hope is she's going to be able to distribute it to, a whole bunch of people, kind of first start with the state of Wisconsin, but be able to sample lakes, tributaries, etc., that any age would be able to kind of go out and do the sampling, all the way down to elementary school, all the way up to potentially like grandparents university that's done at Wisconsin. So kind of like hit that full spectrum. So while it's not perfectly, already done, that is something that we are kind of thinking about, hoping to kind of, connect that citizen science with, the research that's going on. So Natalie, I really appreciate that comment.
And this is not related, but it's really a callback to something. We've all seen those pictures, like the dead bird on the beach full of plastic. And I thought I had one of those. I've seen a fair number of dead animals on the beach, and there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. And so I saw one, I thought it was full of plastic, and I was kind of excited. I was like, I'm going to get this picture. I finally documented this here. And then I realized I got close with my camera and it was full of maggots. So it was not plastic, it was maggots. And I know that's not really related to this, but it was kind of a fun story. And then I took a picture because I had this bird full of maggots, which was pretty cool. So I'm still looking, you see even on like our Great Lakes outreach stuff, sometimes it's like, a picture of a fish full of plastic, and then it's like a tuna, and it's like, can't we at least get, well, maybe that's good that we don't see a lot of those, but yeah, that's another kind of visual way to demonstrate these problems. But I think it's not necessarily the issue that we see. And also back to the ghost net stuff, like a lot of the imagery for that is like seals and whales and sea turtles, and it's that's not really the issue we have here, but it doesn't mean that it isn't still a problem.
Titus, since you brought up the ghost nets again, I was wondering if you could explain to me why you have the anglers tag the ghost net instead of just remove it. Is it a safety issue, or could you just elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think, that's a good question. First off, it's a legal issue. Really, they're not allowed to pull it out. That's why we partnered with the law enforcement folks, because they legally can remove these, because, it could be if an angler just didn't like a net, they could pull it out and say it was lost, and or maybe they're using it. So that, there's legality issues there. There is safety issues too. I mean, like our message was, you get hooked in these, don't try to save your gear. Don't jump out of your boat. Just, cut it, free yourself, and then, get out of there. And why marking helps, the lakes are so big. Even if you say you're tangled up, you pulled your gear up, you see you've got a net there, you cut your gear. By the time it's always windy out there, the boat's moving, there's currents. By the time you drop a GPS point for where you were or where you think the net was, it can be pretty far away. So when the law enforcement folks came out, they basically have a starting point, and what they had to do is, without a buoy or a marker left behind, they basically just have to start running this grid back and forth, which Russ would be used to with basically when they did all the mapping. That's all they did with sonar, is just you go back and forth and cover the whole lake bed, and it takes a long time. And so that's what they would have to do, basically dragging this kind of grapple behind their boat. And so you can see where that saves a lot of like this might be a whole half day or even 6 or 8 hours to try to recover this net. But if you've got a float on it, you just like go up to it, pull it up, and head home. So, it was really about a safety first, and then, efficiency, and just improving the process. And I think, a lot of these, it's about just improving awareness, improving, the efficiency of kind of, cleaning this stuff up and, finding the right partners and working together.
I love that you say that you're working together in partnerships, because I think that's exactly what our Nurdle Patrol is trying to do, is trying to get citizen partners and a lot of different collaborations with all these different organizations to really get the word out about the safety of our beaches and our lakes and keeping everything as healthy as possible. Since we were just talking about tagging things, I actually want to go back to Russ, because I think you mentioned something about the shipwrecks being tagged, and maybe there was a plastic line that was being used. And I'm wondering if there's some other material that could be used for that, so we could get away from plastics. But of course, the advantage of a plastic is how durable it is and how long lasting it is. So I'm wondering if there's a non-plastic way that we can tag the shipwrecks that maybe would be better for the environment.
That's a good question, and it popped into my mind too when you guys were talking about this. And I had the question of all of this past polypro line that's on these wrecks. How significant is that? And Gavin kind of answered one of the questions I had. Does it degrade? Or, is it, in my mind, are these microplastics kind of sloughing off? So if we retrieve some of this, is that a good thing? And then going forward with we use polypro line to mark shipwrecks now, to put a mooring buoy there to make it safer for people to dive and kind of promote tourism. But I wonder about the degradation of that as well. In our minds, it's fairly slow. Once you get below a certain depth, it's like 40 degrees all the time or colder. But I would love to explore how that line may kind of degrade, and can we swap it out essentially? If we could go to another material entirely, we've done chain. That's a good way to go. But for the reasons you mentioned, it's a little lighter, it's durable, the polypro stuff. But it's a great question. We should look at that. And for certain, we have, this is more than you want to know, but most of the system goes to about 20 feet. And then there's another polypro line that goes to the surface. So each year we can take the surface buoy off, and that subsurface buoy stays in the water column. That line, because it's like susceptible to sunlight, does chafe and wear. So that is certainly one we could kind of periodically switch out without much trouble at all. Great question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's really interesting. I didn't know anything about that. So I feel like maybe we should start thinking about some of the positives, some of the things that we can do to help make a positive impact on our community. Because I think a lot of times when we get into the weeds here, it can feel overwhelming. So are there little things that we as citizens can do? Are there medium-sized things that we can do if you're like getting more excited about it? And are there really big things that we can do if somebody's really, really passionate about this? So what are those different like small, medium, and large things that we can do as a citizen to have a big impact?
Well, since
go ahead, Russ. No, go ahead.
No, just because I'm learning as we go here. I love Titus's the washing machine filter. And, also, we all know a whole bunch of people, and they know a bunch of people. And so, this idea that, when you do something, you describe it to someone else, oh, that's really interesting, I'd like to try that. Or Gavin, you talked about the water sampling sets. I mean, I have 3 kids, and you can certainly see how that can be interesting to a whole group of people. So the question is, how do you make people aware of this, I think. But in terms of the small, medium, large, I love the small stuff, because it's easy for normal everyday person to do, to work into their lives. And the more my family gets aware of plastics, when I see a packaged toy or all the plastic bags at the grocery store, I do think the first thing that hits my mind is, wow, that's never going away, no matter what I do with it or where I put it or what so how do I just reduce as opposed to try and recycle that? But those small things, Titus, I just kudos for that that filter one. I'm going to try that for sure.
Yeah, and I'll send you some specific specs on that. Okay, I'm not getting any, I don't get anything for this, but it's the Filtrol is the company. So, look it up. I think it's the Filtrol 150, and there are some other filtration products out there. So to keep on the laundry room, I've been using these little tabs for detergent, and actually just learned that even though I'm trying to do better, they actually have like this, degradable vinyl plastic that's like a binder in there. So it's like I'm trying my best, and even then, there's still plastic in there. So these are just little tabs. You get this little cardboard like envelope basically with, I think it's like 30 or 50 washes. You just pull a tab off, you put it in, because the alternative is if you're buying liquid detergent, even that concentrated stuff, you're paying for not just the plastic bottle, but also all that water that's in there. And really a lot of it is just kind of the shelf space and looking flashy and all the advertisement for that. So, there are these options, and definitely the different kind of, subscription companies that, will send you like, oh, once a month you get the little, you bought the container, you get the little dishwasher, thing that you put in there every night, instead of, buying it at the store. And there's, even those are like, it's this plastic bag thing that degrades in the dishwasher and then goes out. So, it is better than some things, but, I think there's always room to improve. Two is, with clothes, if you're, one is quality, better quality, clothing. There is, there's a lot of, inexpensive clothes out there, and generally, you get what you pay for with that. You can buy a cheaper shirt that lasts a year, or you can buy a little more expensive one that may last 5 years. And, one thing is, look at the fabric. So get cotton, get wool. You can buy natural fibers, and those are, if they're natural fibers, if they're coming from an animal or a plant, those are going to biodegrade. So that is another thing you can do. And if you buy that kind of better quality, it's going to shed less fibers as well. So those are kind of two things you can do. And I think don't buy bottled water if you don't have to. I mean, certainly there are times, but I think a lot of us, and what people don't know about bottled water, generally, like, it's tap water from some other city, and you're paying a whole lot. It's just $10-$20 a gallon for bottled water. And living in Manitowoc, we have got Lake Michigan water coming in. It's delicious. It's this time of year, it's cold. It's super cold. It's like, you don't even need it to refrigerate it because the water is so cold. So, that is, it's a nice bonus, and, it's cheap, it's free. Well, it's practically free. And, so, on the economic side, you're saving money and you get delicious water. So.
Definitely. Like, I think that there's, like you talked about, there's sort of a continuum here. Like, somebody who just learned about this, like, do something easy, one thing easy, and stick to it. Whether that's, don't take the straw, don't take a bag, start to reuse bags that you have in your house when you go to the grocery store. Somebody told me the other day, don't even bring them in the store, put all the groceries in the cart, and when you get to the car, put the groceries in the bags. So that, I feel like that's where I always fall off the sled. Like, I forget to take them from the car into the grocery store. Just like Costco, they have a box. It's sort of that mentality. But pick up trash anywhere and put it in the right place. Think about reducing single-use plastic, as Gavin said and Titus said. Single-use plastic basically means something you use once and you throw it away, whether that be a straw, a cup, a container that something came in. There's also this whole idea of, fix things before you throw them away. Anything, like, Titus was talking about clothes, but, repair is better than tossing it. Really thinking about just reducing your overall consumption, and just thinking about, do I really need to buy another one of these things, whatever these things are, because we have the society of more. And maybe we need to think about, I'm not sure who brought it up, but it's definitely the circular economy, like the birth and death of a product, whatever it is. If I buy it, do I know what I'm going to do with it at the end of use? And as we said, it would be great for companies to start thinking about this more and more, particularly with the microplastics, but kind of with everything, right? Like, I just feel like there's a lot of really easy, no major commitment things that you can do. Especially when you go to the lake, also think about what you're bringing, like don't bring plastic to the lake. And one of the things that I find all the time are these little tabs that come off of like squeezy boxes for kids. And I know you're the mom and you're trying to keep track of your kid and they're screaming and you're like, I know they like this applesauce. Let me flip this thing off and hand it to them. Well, that little twirly top lid is always all over the beach, so it's those little things too. Like if you're not going to make a major commitment to change, things like the products that you use or putting a filter on, that just thinking about what you're using and what's going to happen to it when you're done with it, I think is really important.
And I mean, I can echo everybody that's already gone. But I think the only thing that I would add, that I always like to add, is like, it's not taboo to talk about it. You can always talk about, these contaminants that are in our water, and it's okay. And like, they're there. And if we don't bring light to it, whether you start at just a simple conversation with somebody, or you reach out to a representative, or you go even further, right? You could hit all three of your kind of steps, Amy, that you were bringing up: small, medium, large. But it starts by talking about it, and then the more we talk about it, the more it brings to light, and the more momentum you can get. But it's not taboo. Like, it's okay to talk about these contaminants, and yeah, that's the only other thing I'll add to it.
Yeah, and I'd say, the example of, microbeads, like there was, once, the word got out that microbeads were in, all these personal care products, and, like that very rapidly, laws were passed to, reduce their use. And, they're still out there, but, definitely. And there was a lot more interest in, alternate, products. Instead of using plastic, you could use apricot, like ground up apricot pits. So, that becomes kind of a, that's a success story, I think, where, people were like, once they knew it was there, they were like, why am I brushing my teeth? Like, I very early, as soon as I heard about that, I was like, I started reading the label on toothpaste, because I was like, why do I have plastic in here? And, it was like, that's something you can do. And, enough people were kind of contacting people, and, they passed some laws pretty quickly, where a lot of these law changes, might take decades. And this was, all within just a few years. So, your voice can be important, and you can, contact your local lawmaker, and they, sometimes it's only just, just all the people watching this, this panel, if you all call your, local representative, that might be enough just to get them to change their vote. So I'm not advocating for any position, because we're Sea Grant, we're not advocacy, but definitely involve yourself in the whole process.
Right. And I mentioned it earlier, but you can go on greatlakes.org/plastic. And there's a lot of information there about, in your own community, some tools for what to use, and letters, pre-written letters that you can edit before you send them. But it's a quick, I was a little hesitant to do that, but then I pulled it up and I realized that I could change the letter to say specifically what I wanted to say. And I felt really good about, okay, I just did that. I sent that, and I got responses within 3 days from all of the officials that I sent the letters to. So you're going to be heard. So that's important too, that people think a lot of people don't want to do things like that. And I definitely have always been sheepish about stuff like that, but you will be heard. It does matter. Every little voice matters. Every step matters. So it's important.
Well, thank you all so much. I think what I'd like to do is give all four of you a chance to remind everybody how they could get involved with your specific organization, since that seems like one of those little, maybe / even medium impacts that a person can have on their local environment. So I think we'll just go through in the same order that we did everything else, and you can inform the audience about how they could potentially get involved with the organization that you're associated with. And then if there's any last minute questions, we'll take them, but we only have 10 minutes left. So I think we can try to work on wrapping it up. We'll start with Titus.
All right, I'll throw in a plug for Wendy. If Wendy was here, she'd tell you to, check out the Facebook page for the Friends of the Manitowoc River Watershed. If you're in the Manitowoc area, come out for a beach cleanup. Hey, anytime you're on the beach, that's great. Or you're by water, it's fantastic. So, worst case, you had to go down by the lake and you get to pick up trash. So you're making the beach better. Oh, it's a win-win. So do that. I'll put my Sea Grant hat on, and we do have, check out Wisconsin Sea Grant. Just search marine debris and Sea Grant, and you'll find there is just all kinds of different products out there, different programs that we're doing all over the country. Maybe something in Florida looks cool. Steal that idea. And we always steal ideas because, why do you don't need to create something brand new if someone's already doing it and it works. So I'm all about, taking those ideas, giving, acknowledging where they came from, and then, putting them to use here. So, lots of great opportunities, I think, around the country. We do have Wisconsin Sea Grant has several, especially education type programs, the trash trunks, which are, sort of these educational trunks, tell your kids' teachers, tell the teachers in your community, these are actually available to check out through the Wisconsin Water Library. They will ship them right from Madison to your local library. You can pick it up and then use it in the classroom. So, these, you don't even have to create these, lesson plans. It's all there. It exists. And, take advantage of these resources. And if you have questions, call Gavin up. He will answer all your questions. And he is very happy to answer those. And, I am too. Always happy to answer questions.
I was going to add, I think Titus meant to say we borrow, we reuse, and we recycle other people's ideas, not steal. We just recycle and reuse them. But sorry, I'm gonna jump ahead here, Amy. I'm gonna echo everything, Titus. I'm also at Wisconsin Sea Grant. I am happy to answer any of your phone calls, anything contaminants when it comes to the fisheries stuff. I'm gonna ship you back over to Titus, as much as I can. But yeah, just fully reiterate everything Titus said. Wisconsin Sea Grant, where our goals are here to kind of make sure we have these clean Great Lakes and everything. So yeah, feel free to reach out whenever you have questions or even just want to talk.
And then we'll go to Sarah.
So I mentioned about the plastics. greatlakes.org/plastics is a place you can go for resources. But also, if you want to get involved with beach cleanups or learn anything about, sign up for a beach that you want a captain, or look for cleanups that are happening right now. It's kind of quiet because it's January, so a lot of people haven't jumped in there. But the kickoff for the beach cleanups around the big kickoff will be Earth Day weekend. So April, what is that, the 21st to the 23rd. And you can find all that information at greatlakes.org/adopt. Again, there's training in there. There's all the detail about data collection, anything you want to know about running your own beach cleanup or getting involved. So please come out. Again, like Titus said, the worst thing is you have to be by the lake for a couple hours and pick up trash. And if you're out at the lake anyway, pick up the trash without being part of a cleanup. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Russ.
Yeah, I would tag on to what Titus was saying. Google National Marine Sanctuary System and marine debris, and you'll probably find some really great programs that are happening in other national marine sanctuaries. And we can bring those to bear here. And we'd love to work on that with folks. The sanctuary is a living classroom, particularly for educators. Think of it as a living classroom. There are a number of NOAA grants out there, Great Lakes Literacy grants, Watershed grants, Ocean Guardian programs. Again, you just kind of Google up NOAA and education and grant opportunities. You'll land on the NOAA Office of Education. And many times you need to know a partner to kind of make those work. And so we'd be happy to work on that. If there's something, an educator that strikes their fancy and we can help support that, that'd be great. We also have a Sanctuary Advisory Council. We just are making our first selections for our first advisory council right now, but they're on 2-year rotations. And so as that comes up, keep your eye out for having 1 to 15 seats on the advisory council for the Marine Sanctuary.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Cool. So thank you all so much. I want to especially thank our 4 panelists. They were amazing and they gave us so much great information tonight. I especially want to thank Tim in the background for running all of the tech, because I would have no clue how to do any of that. And I want to thank all of you audience members who joined us tonight. And I also want to thank the people that might watch this after the fact. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our wonderful experts talk about these issues and how they relate to our Great Lakes watershed and the wonderful things that hopefully we can all do to have an impact on our community. I think that's everything. So unless Tim has something else to add, I'd like to say thank you again and have a great evening.
The only thing I'd like to add are 2 specific thank yous from people that were following along. Natalie wanted to say thank you for the amazing and eye-opening discussions. And John wanted to say thank you for doing what you do. I appreciate your work. So it seems like that is a great way to go out. I assume if someone contacted me for the PowerPoint that it would be okay to share with them. Okay, so if anyone would like that PowerPoint, just know that you can email me at tkaczynski@manitowoc.org and I will get that PowerPoint out to you. If you enjoyed tonight, tell everyone you know to watch it, because it will be on our Facebook and our YouTube page pretty much forever, in a good way, as opposed to pollutants, which aren't in a good way. This is a positive forever. So I too would like to thank all of you for being here tonight. It was a wonderful program. We literally have 3 minutes for me to get out of the building, but amazing amount of information, very well presented, and very, I don't want to say fun, but it was great learning all this information. So thank you all so much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Have a great night, everyone.
Great
Bye.
night.
Bye.